Hi guys, it's Rebecca. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. Today's video is going to be my March wrap-up. This is for my A to C reading challenge that I'm doing with a bunch of girls here on YouTube, other project planners that enjoy reading as well. So basically we're trying to achieve the same thing that we did with the A to C panning challenge. Everybody's doing it a little bit different. I personally am doing the first letter of the book title that corresponds to the letter of the alphabet. This month I read 10 books. And I should say I read because, let me put them down because they're heavy. Because I actually only read 2 books and the rest I listened on audiobook. I have a reading goal of 100 books this year and I didn't do very well last month, so I was trying to catch up. If I hadn't done that, I don't think I would have gotten through 10 books. But anyway, I'm going to start with, I have my little list here of books. So from last time, I had 18 letters left from the alphabet. And unfortunately, I only was able to eliminate 4 letters. So I'm going to start with those 4 letters. Going in alphabetical order, the first letter that I finished was L, and it's Light by Michael Grant. This is the last book in the Gone series. I really enjoyed this book. I can't say much about this book, unfortunately, because it's the last book in the series. The series has 6 books, so it's a pretty lengthy series. But basically the premise of the Gone series is this world where everybody who was over the age of, I want to say 15, disappeared one day. And only the people who were 14 and younger were left on Earth. And so you kind of follow all the survivors, I guess you can say, as they try to find out what's going on and they try to survive while they figure out what's happening. I can't say much because it'll be like a spoiler. This is an older series. I really enjoyed it. I would recommend the Gone series if you haven't read it. For the letter O, I read the book The One and Only by Emily Giffin. I have read a few of her books. I have read 6 other of her books. This is book number 7 and this is my least favorite book, unfortunately. This book follows this girl who is a sports journalist. Then her best friend's mom dies and she starts developing feelings for her friend's dad, who also happens to be a coach for this team that she is supposed to be reporting on. It's just like huge drama. The thing with Emily Giffin books is that they're a very slow burn. In reality, not much happens in these books, so it's a lot of like storytelling, but the story doesn't really move along. It's kind of like I said, it's a slow burn. Climax of this book was kind of like very anticlimactic, and everything wrapped up nicely in a bow, like in the last 20 pages of the book. There wasn't really any conflict. I wouldn't recommend this book. Not something that I see myself rereading again. The next letter is for the letter P, and for that I read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. This is a adult fantasy book and it's based off of Chinese history, if I'm not mistaken. So I guess you can say it's a historical Chinese fiction book. And we follow our character, what is her name? Rin, R-I-N. And she is this girl who has been orphaned because of the war, and she lives with a family who are like opium dealers. Opium plays a big part in the story that is this book. And so she's kind of in an arranged marriage to some older man, and of course she doesn't want to get married. Her dream is to become a soldier, become part of the army. So eventually she's able to convince them to break off the engagement or the arrangement for her marriage to this person. But they basically tell her that they're not going to help her. She has to take a test to be able to go into this academy. And so she eventually gets trained by a nobody person. It kind of reminds me of like Kung Fu Panda. You know how what is his name? The panda. He's looking for Chief Kofu. Is that his name? I can't remember. But that's what was going in my head. Like, you know, she's looking for this one teacher who's going to teach her, but her training is not as sophisticated as all the other people who are actually being trained the proper way. You know, she's kind of like the old school, kind of like, I guess you can say kind of like the Karate Kid as well, like being trained by a nobody. Anyway, so she's able to get into this academy. I really enjoyed this book. I think it's gonna be a trilogy if I'm not mistaken, and I think the second book already came out. I am very picky when it comes to fantasy. There are some high fantasy books that are just like way out there and I just don't understand the plot. I get confused with the system. But this one was very easy to read. I was never bored reading this book. I was never confused as to what was happening with the fantasy aspect, which is something that I have a hard time with the other fantasy books that I own. But I really like it. I enjoyed it. I can't wait, like I said, to read the next book. If you guys are into fantasy and historical fiction, I think you guys would enjoy this. And lastly, for the alphabet letters, I read for the letter U, and this is Unwind by Neil Shusterman. Now, this is a book that has had a lot of hype for many years. I actually owned the whole trilogy. I was able to pick it up on Book Outlet like little by little. And so I'm planning on marathoning this series because this book is so good. So this book takes place sometime in the future in America, where it is illegal to have abortions, but it's legal to like abort the child once the child is grown. So the process is called unwinding, and that means that between the ages of 13 through 17, the parents have a choice of like, okay, we're gonna have the baby, we're not gonna abort it, but we're going to have them unwound during this time period of their age. So the unwinding meaning that they are taken apart and they're taken as organ donors. There are harvest camps where these people are taken to, and then that's where they take out, you know, the heart, the lungs, the liver, the arms, hair, eyes, skin, anything and everything you can take from the body to give to someone who needs it, they take it. So the idea is that you are not really dead, you are living through all these other people who you have donated your body to. So that's essentially what the plot is about, and we follow three teenagers who are going to be unbound. One has no idea. It's a shock for him to find out that his parents are deciding to unwind him. And then the other one is a girl who is an orphan. She's like a property of the state, and it's her turn to be unwound. And then we have another one who is a tithe, meaning that his parents had him for the sole purpose of unwinding him in the future. It's kind of like three different storylines, but then once they are running away, their lives kind of intersect, and then you follow their journey trying to escape and getting caught and escaping again, and so on and so forth. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5 stars. It felt very different than anything I have read before. It's a dystopian. I know dystopia is not a very popular theme anymore. I know it was a few years ago, back when the Hunger Games and Divergent and all those series were out, but this was very different. I really enjoyed it, and hopefully by next month I can finish the whole series. So those are the books that fit a letter for the category. Now, if you guys have been watching my previous wrap-ups, I am also doing a Pop Sugar reading challenge, and there's a bunch of prompts that you're supposed to complete by the end of the year. So there's 50 prompts. And this month I finished 6 prompts. So the first prompt that I finished from the Pop Sugar reading challenge is a book becoming a movie in 2019. And for that I read A Dog's Way Home by Bruce Cameron. This movie came out in January, if I'm not mistaken. Bruce Cameron writes such sad dog stories. All the books are told from the dog's points of view. So it just made me love my doggies even more. You guys know I have 2 doggies, so these books just like hit home. For this book, we follow this guy who they're trying to like demolish these. I'm assuming it's kind of like old apartments or old housing, and they're going to demolish it. But this guy knows that there's animals, there's dogs and cats and like stray animals, and he goes and feeds the animals. And finally, they demolish everything, but he's able to save one of the dogs. Eventually, the dog grows up, and then due to certain circumstances, he has to send the dog away for the dog's protection, but the dog runs away from the house that was watching him. So the dog gets lost, and it's just a story about the dog making her way back to this guy who lost her. I really loved this book. It's just kind of like made me go like, oh, like the whole book, and just kind of like made me think like I wonder what my dogs are thinking. I hope like they love me as much as this dog loved his owner. I loved it. 5 out of 5 stars. If you're a dog lover and you like to read, I recommend this one. 5 out of 5. The next prompt was your favorite prompt from a previous reading challenge, and I chose the next book in a series that you already started. So the next book in a series that I had already started was Light by Michael Grant. Like I said, this was the last book in the series, and I was reading the other books prior to this during the booktubeathon that happened in September, August maybe. I wanted to read this one next, but I never got to it, so the prompt seemed to be fitting. And then also for a book you meant to read in 2018, Light. I was hoping to finish the series in 2018, but I didn't get to it, so this was definitely on my TBR from last year, so it fit perfectly. The next prompt is a book about family, and for that I went with The One and Only because we are reading about two families whose lives are, I guess, not changed, but challenged when these two characters kind of fall in love with each other. The next prompt is a book with an item of clothing / accessory on the cover. And for that I went with Stalking Jack the Ripper by Carrie Maniscalco. And you can see there's a girl wearing a dress. This was a very fun book. I haven't read anything like this in a while. And I'm not familiar with the story of Jack the Ripper myself. I'm not very familiar with it. So it was a nice way to kind of like get introduced to the story. But basically this book starts with a girl. What is her name? I forgot her name. The story starts with this girl who enjoys doing autopsies with her uncle, and because it's the Victorian era, there's a very, it's kind of frowned upon, you know, back then, like women were supposed to have, so that wasn't a place for a woman, let's just say. But then, you know, all these murders start happening and she's doing like all these autopsies, so it's kind of like a murder mystery type story where she takes it upon herself along with her friends to try and find who the killer is. We just go from there. I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I went through this really fast, really enjoyed it. I wasn't bored at all. And I can't wait to finish the rest of the series. I think so far there's 3 books. And then the last prompt that I finished for this Pop Sugar Reading Challenge was a book inspired by mythology, legend, or folklore. And for that I went Hunting with Prince Dracula, which is the second book or the follow-up book to Stalking Jack the Ripper. And I think Dracula is folklore? Would it be considered the Dracula story folklore? I don't know. But this book, it kind of takes off right after Stalking Jack the Ripper. Like I said, our main character here wants to learn more about doing autopsies, and her uncle is a very like famous autopsist, morguist. What do you call those people that do the autopsy? Anyway, he's a very prominent person who does that. So he calls this like school where you are actually taught how to do the autopsies. And he calls in a favor and they accept her as a student in the academy. But the problem with that is that, again, being in the Victorian era, the academy is just filled with males, and she's the only female aside from like the principal's niece and the girl that cleans. So they're like basically the only 3 girls. And then again, we go with another murder mystery and we try to find out who this Dracula person is. Really enjoyed it. It's a lot bigger than the Stalking Jack the Ripper, but it reads just as fast. I liked it, but I have to say I liked the first book better than this one. And the last 3 books that I have don't fit any letter. They're either a repeat letter from the alphabet or they don't fit any of the prompts. So I'm going to start with Unholy, which is the second book to the Unwind series. I can't say much about this book because, like I said, it's the second book in the quartet. I'm really going to try to I'm really gonna try to read the last 2 books because it's a very fun series. I gotta say though, didn't like it as much as the first one. This kind of gave me feelings of the Gone series by Michael Grant, the series that I finished with Light. The kind of like the events that were happening kind of reminded me of how the kids were back in the phase from the Gone series. So it was very reminiscent about that. We'll see how the 3rd book goes, but I still enjoyed it. I can't wait to finish reading this series. Then I have Stolen here by Lucy Christopher. This book had a lot of hype a few years ago, a long time ago actually, maybe like 8-9 years ago when I first started getting into BookTube. And it's kind of, this book doesn't really have chapters. It's kind of just like a long letter. And this book is about this girl who gets abducted at the airport and she develops Stockholm Syndrome, which is when you kind of like fall for your kidnapper. The problem I had with this book was that I didn't believe her feelings. It's just a lot of things happened that were not believable. Like I thought I was gonna be like on the edge of my seat and be like in conflict with myself, like wanting to cheer for the romance between the two characters, but like battling with myself, being like, oh, it's wrong because he's the bad guy. But I didn't care for either one of them. Like I was just kind of like, whatever. I didn't believe the romance. I didn't believe the situations they got themselves caught in. I didn't believe how she got kidnapped. It had a lot of potential, but I don't think it was executed correctly. I gave it 3 stars because I finished it, but I wouldn't recommend it. And the last book that I read was Perfect Lies by Kirsten White. This is the second book and the last book to the duology Mind Games. This book, it was just alright. I can't say much again because it's the final book in the duology. The plot of Mind Games is you have 2 sisters. It's told from it's a dual perspective book. And you have a sister who is a seer, which means she kind of can see the future. And then you have a sister who is a feeler, who kind of like senses when things are gonna happen. In this case, the sister who is the seer, she's actually blind. So she is taken to this school that's supposed to help her with her sight. But it turns out that this is a kind of like a government shady agency that's actually trying to get a hold of her sister because she is a feeler who can see the future. I wasn't really into this book, so I honestly don't even remember it. Because I read so many other great stories and I read this towards the beginning of the month. I was just not invested. But that's it, guys. Those are the 10 books that I read for this month. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any book recommendations, let me know. Thank you guys for watching and I'll see you on my next video.